I want you to mentally reset your internal clock. We are going back to October 24th out.
Okay, the turn of the millennium. A very specific, very strange moment in cultural history.
It really was. If you look at the music charts on that specific day, it is a bizarre landscape. I mean, you have the absolute peak of the TRL era, Total Request Live.
Oh, absolutely. It's Carson Daly. It's the countdown.
Exactly. You have Britney Spears, NSYNC, the Backstreet Boys. Pop music is manufactured, it's polished, and it is absolutely dominating the airwaves.
And on the rock side of things,
Yeah.
it's, well, confused, probably the polite way to put it.
That's a good word for it.
The grunge era is dead and buried. Glam rock is a joke. Metallica, the gods of metal, have just cut their hair and alienated their entire fan base with Load and Reload. The industry was desperately looking for the next big thing, but nobody really knew what it looked like.
And then, quietly, without much fanfare at all, this debut album drops from a band nobody really knows. A band with a weird name from Agora Hills, California. Industry expectation.
I'd argue it was less than zero. They were expected to flop. The whole rap rock thing had been done, right? The industry thought that wave was cresting, if not already over.
And yet, that album, Hybrid Theory, didn't just chart. It became the best-selling album on the planet for the year 2001.
On the planet.
It sold 4.8 million copies in the U.S. alone in its first. It became the soundtrack for an entire generation of, angst and rebellion and hope all mixed together.
It is the diamond-certified monster of the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's truly one of those albums that everyone owned, regardless of what tribe they belonged to in high school. The jocks had it, the goths had it, everybody.
So today, we are doing a proper deep dive. We aren't just reminiscing about hearing In the End on the radio a million times. We are going to unpack the technical architecture of how Linkin Park built a sound that on paper really shouldn't have worked. We're looking at the engineering, the psychology, and the business strategy.
And we have to look at the cost, because you just don't get that kind of raw, visceral scream, the kind Chester Bennington delivered, without some serious pain behind it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to look at the tragic, complex reality of Chester's life and how this massive machine eventually weighed on.
Let's start with the zero to hero narrative, because I think a lot of people have this misconception that Linkin Park was industry.
Oh, yeah, that they were manufactured in a lab by Warner Bros. To sell baggy pants and wallet chains.
Exactly, which is so ironic because the reality is the complete opposite. They were the band that nobody wanted to sign. They were kind of the outcasts, even among the outcasts.
What?
Let's break that down, because the core of the band, the very beginning, it starts with Mike Shinoda. And looking at the background here, this surprised me. He wasn't some street-hardened punk. He was a classical pianist.
A prodigy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And this is absolutely crucial to understanding the band's entire sound. Mike is the architect. He's Japanese-American, grew up in the suburbs, and his mother pushed him relentlessly into classical piano. But she wasn't trying to make him a rock star. She wanted it for his college applications.
The classic, this will look good on a resume approach to parenting.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
What it did was it rewired his brain. So you have this kid who is technically proficient in Bach and Beethoven. He understands complex chord progressions, harmony, structure, but his passion, his obsession, is the golden era of hip-hop.
Why?
He's listening to the Public Enemy, NWA, the Beastie Boys. He's soaking all that in.
That is a weird, almost contradictory clash of inputs. Classical piano and NWA.
It is. But that clash is the DNA of the band.
Yeah.
In 1996, he starts a group called Zero, spelled with an X. And he's not jamming in a garage with a bunch of guys drinking beer. No.
Right.
He's in his bedroom with a 4-track recorder, layering samples and beats.
A DIY studio.
Totally. He's approaching rock music with a hip-hop production mentality from day one. He's looking at music as data, as blocks to be arranged, not just a feeling in the room.
Okay, so you have the architect in Mike. He's got the vision, but a band needs connect. You can be a genius in your bedroom, but if nobody hears it, it just doesn't matter. This brings us to Brad Delce, the guitarist.
Right. Brad is the strategist,
Yeah.
the hustler in a good way. He manages to land an internship with a guy named Jeff.
And Jeff Blue was. Who? Exactly.
He was a vice president at Zomber Music Publishing. Now, in the late 90s, Jeff Blue is a kingmaker. He signed Korn. He signed Limp Bizkit. He is the guy riding the new metal waves straight to the bank. He is the guy you want to know.
And there's this incredible anecdote that I think really shows you the mindset of these kids. Brad is an unpaid intern, right? He's in Jeff Blue's office.
Just try to picture this scene. Jeff Blue has a massive platinum poster of Limp Bizkit on the wall. It's his pride and joy, his biggest success story.
Right.
And Brad, this curly-haired college kid who is supposed to be fetching coffee and making copies, he points at the poster and says, "That band isn't that great. I'm going to build a band that's better than that."
That's not confident.
Yeah.
That's borderline delusion. You're an intern. You're telling the guy who signs your checks, or at least validates your internship, that his biggest success is mediocre.
It's wildly arrogant, just an insane level of gut. But Jeff Blue, he liked it. He liked the audacity. He saw something in that hunger, so he went to see Zero.
Where did they?
At the Was Good Go in West Hollywood, a legendary spot. And he saw enough potential there, he saw that spark, to offer them a development.
Hold on. A development. We hear this term a lot in music docs. What does that actually mean? Is that a record contract? Are they rich now?
No, not at all. And this is where so many dreams just die. A development deal is a publisher giving you a little bit of money, I mean peanuts really, to record demos to see if you're worth signing to a real label. It's a maybe.
It's a first date.
It's a let's date and see how it goes. And for Zero, that maybe turned into 3 years of no.
3 years.
3 solid years of grinding. They sent tapes to every single label. Atlantic, Geffen, Capitol, Interscope, you name it. They got rejected by them.
What were the labels? What was the problem?
They were told the rap rock thing was over. They were told it was derivative of corn, biscuit. Mostly, they were told the singer at the time, a guy named Mark Wakefield, just wasn't strong enough. He didn't have that star power.
And eventually, that pressure, that constant rejection, it broke them.
It did. Mark Wakefield quit. He just couldn't take the rejection anymore. He had to move on. So now the band is completely dead in the water. They have the music, they have the ambition, but they have no voice.
And meanwhile, 400 miles away in Phoenix, Arizona, you have Chester Bennington. And his situation, from what I've read, is even bleaker than Zero's.
Much bleaker. Chester was almost 23, which in industry terms for a new artist is, getting up there.
You're practically a senior citizen in pop music at 20.
Pretty much. He was married. He was working a dead-end job at a digital services firm, basically a glorified tech support role.
Yeah.
And he had just quit his local band, Gray Days, because they weren't going anywhere. He was done. He literally told his wife he was going to quit music and focus on a real career.
It's terrifying to think how close we came to never hearing that voice. I mean, it was coin toss away from him just being a guy working in IT in Phoenix for the rest of his life.
It really was.
So how do these two failing entities, Zero in LA and Chester in Phoenix, how do they collide?
Jeff Blue again. He's the bridge. He's still looking for a singer for these guys he believes in. And he remembered a tape of Chester's old band, Gray Days, that had crossed his desk years earlier. He remembered that voice.
So he just calls him.
Ships a demo instrumental of Zero to Phoenix and tells Chester, if you want a shot, record vocals on this now.
And this is the part of the story that just feels like it's straight out of a movie script.
It was
Chester's birthday, March 20th, 1999. His friends are throwing him a party, and he cancels. He bails on his friends. He tells his family, I have to do. He goes into a local studio and just pours everything he has onto that.
He calls Jeff Blue 3 days later, and this part is wild. He plays the recording over the phone, literally holds the telephone receiver up to the speaker in the studio. And you can imagine the terrible quality, right? But even through the static, Jeff Blue is stunned. He hears that voice, the range, the aggression, the melody, all of it. And he tells Chester, get on a plane to LA immediately. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
So he arrives for the audition. And this walk-off story, I need to know if this is apocryphal or if this actually happened, because it sounds way too good to.
According to multiple sources, including the band members themselves, it is 100% true. Zero is holding auditions in this dingy rehearsal space in LA. It's chaotic. All these guys are coming in and out, trying to be the next big rock star.
Right.
Chester goes into the live room and just starts singing, unleashes that voice. And there's another guy in the waiting room, another candidate, hearing this through the wall.
What happens?
The guy just stands up. He walks over to Mike and Brad, who are standing outside, and he says, if you don't pick that guy, you're crazy. And he just leaves.
He didn't even audition.
Didn't even try. He forfeited. He just knew immediately that he was completely and totally outclassed.
That is the ultimate mic drop. I mean, what a moment. So Chester is in, but Zero is a terrible name. It implies nothing.
Yeah, they knew they had to change it. Their first idea was hybrid theory.
Which makes perfect sense given the album title later. It's what they were.
It described the sound perfectly, but legal issues killed it. Apparently another band had the name Hybrid, so they were scrambling. And we have to acknowledge some of the truly terrible ideas they had in the mix during this period.
Oh, please share. I love bad band names.
Okay, one of them was Plea, just the word plea.
Ooh, terrible. Very 90s.
The very 90s. And my personal favorite, get ready for this, Platinum Lotus Foundation.
Platinum Lotus Foundation. That sounds like a yoga cult that steals your life savings, not a new metal band.
It's just staggeringly awful. Yeah. Fortunately, they moved past that pretty quickly. Chester eventually suggests Linkin Park because he drove past the actual Linkin Park in Santa Monica every day to get to rehearsal.
And it was neutral, right?
Exactly. It didn't sound like a metal band or a rap group. It was just a place. It was the blank slate they could project their sound onto.
But the domain name issue, the internet was already becoming a major factor, even then.
It was. And the domain linkinpark.com was taken. And it was way too expensive for them to buy. So being the resourceful, DIY kids they were, they just changed the spelling to LINKIN. to snag the .com address.
And this brings up a point that I think is often overlooked. We think of them as these huge rock stars, but they were actually, in a way, early internet pioneers.
That's a huge point. This is 1999, 2000. Facebook doesn't exist. MySpace doesn't exist yet. The labels and MTV controlled everything. But Linkin Park understood community building online before anyone else did.
They literally turned their drummer Rob Borden's apartment into a fulfillment center.
I read about this. They were physically packing envelopes themselves.
Yes, they were spending 10 hours a day packing stickers, letters, and cassette samplers to mail to fans they were connecting with online. And they were engaging in what they called guerrilla marketing. Explain that for the listener who wasn't in an AOL chat room.
It means they would go into the chat rooms and message board for Korn, for Deftones, for Limp Bizkit, where their target audience was hanging out. And they would pose as fans.
No way.
Oh, yeah. They'd post things like, hey, you guys heard of this new band, Linkin Park? They sound like Korn, but with horror, like a DJ. They were basically catfishing the music industry.
They were growth hacking before that was even a term.
Absolutely. So by the time Hybrid Theory dropped, they already had thousands of fans who felt like they had discovered the band personally online. They bypassed the gatekeepers.
That is just brilliant. So the pieces are in place. They finally signed to Warner Bros. In 1990. They enter the studio to record Hybrid. Now, let's deconstruct this album. Why did it sound so different? Because, rap rock existed. Rage Against the Machine existed. What did Linkin Park do differently from a technical?
It comes down to two things, really. The lack of jamming and the heavy use of Pro Tools.
What do you mean by lack of jamming?
Most rock bands write by getting in a room, drinking some beer, and just jamming until a riff or a song happens. Organic, it's loose, it's human. Linkin Park did not do that. They wrote on computers.
So it was more like assembling a puzzle.
Precise. Mike Shinoda was using an Akai MPC, a sampler usually used for hip-hop, to chop up guitar riffs that Brad would play. He was treating the guitar like a sample, not a continuous performance.
So if you listen to Crawling or Paper Cut, the guitar riffs are actually looped and quantized.
Exactly. They lock perfectly to the grid of the beat. There is no human fluctuation in the timing. And that's why it sounded so mechanical and precise. It just hit harder because there was no slop, no room for error.
And they brought in the Dust Brothers for some sounds.
Yes, the legendary duo behind the Fight Club soundtrack and the Beastie Boys' Paul's Boutique. They added a lot of the break beats and the industrial noise textures that gave it that extra layer of grit.
And then you have Andy Wallace mixing it.
The secret weapon. Andy Wallace mixed Nirvana's Nevermind. He is the absolute master of making loud, aggressive guitars sound radio-friendly. He smoothed out the harshest edges so you could play One Step Closer on pop radio right after a Britney Spears song, and it wouldn't scare the advertisers away.
Let's talk about the tracks, because the stories behind these songs are just wild. Crawling.
Massive, massive hit. But it started as the throwaway song called Blue. The band hated it.
They hated it. Crawling.
Hated almost everything about it. They thought the verse was weak, the music was cheesy, but there was this one little piece, the vocal melody at the very end.
Crawling in my skin.
That part. Chester and Mike realized that the vocal hook was special, so they literally scrapped the entire song, kept that one melody, and built a brand new song, Crawling, around it.
Well, that's just an incredible to find the one diamond in the rough and build a palace around it. And lyrically, crawling in my skin, these wounds, they will not.
It's become a bit of a meme now, but at the time, that was incredibly heavy.
It was. And it deals with the physical sensation of addiction, specifically a symptom called formication, medical term. The sensation of insects crawling on or under your skin. It's a very common withdrawal symptom, methamphetamine and alcohol.
So when he's screaming, crawling in my skin, he's not being poetic.
Yeah.
He's literally describing a physiological withdrawal symptom he experienced. That's what makes it so terrifyingly real. And that's the secret sauce of the whole album, You have Mike Shinoda's calculated digital gridlocked production, and then you just drop Chester Bennington's raw, untreated, screaming trauma right on top. It's the friction between that digital coldness and the human heat that creates all the energy.
Wow. Okay. And what about In the End, the nihilistic anthem of a generation? I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end...
Apparently, Chester actually hated that song at first. He didn't think it was heavy enough. But lyrically, it captures this duality he felt, where he felt like a failure despite all the success that was starting to happen. It's about trying your absolute hardest and still feeling like you failed.
It's the ultimate anthem for teenage frustration. And One Step Closer. I love this story, that iconic line, shut up when I'm talking. Who is he talking to?
He was talking to their producer, Don Gilmore.
No way, seriously.
100%. Gilmore was a perfectionist, and he was pushing them really hard. He was constantly rejecting their lyric, telling them to rewrite. Chester got so frustrated in the studio one day that he just stormed into the vocal booth and screamed. That line, shut up when I'm talking to you, was directed right at the guy sitting behind the mixing desk.
That is maybe the most efficient form of anger management I've ever heard. Just turn your frustration with your boss into a multi-platinum hit.
It worked out pretty well for them.
And then there's Paper Cut.
The band's favorite track,
Yeah.
by most accounts. Mike Shinoda said it just wrote itself really quickly. And it's basically the mission statement of the entire band. That pulsing beat, meaning that paranoid lyric. It's like, I'm paranoid looking over my back. It sets the entire tone for the album, right?
So the album drops October 24, 2000, and the numbers are just stupid.
They're insane.
Yeah.
It debuted at number 29, respectable, but then it just kept going. It never went away. It was certified gold in 4 weeks. And as you said, it sold 4.8 million copies in the U.S. alone in its first year.
They were told at one point that they had the best-selling album in the world.
In the world. Beating out pop titans like Britney Spears and NSYNC, the Outcasts had taken over the entire asylum.
So you're Linkin Park. You've just released the biggest album in the world. You've gone from a bedroom studio and packing envelopes to being global superstars. What do you do?
Well, normally you panic. The pressure's on.
The sophomore slump. It's a cliche for a reason.
And the pressure was immense because by 2002, 2003, the whole nu metal genre was actually crashing and burning.
Yeah.
Limp Bizkit and Korn were really struggling with their new releases. The industry expectation was that Linkin Park was a flash in the pan. They were supposed to fade away with the genre.
But they didn't get lazy. They did the opposite. They got obsessive.
They absolutely did. Instead of partying after shows, the typical rock star thing, they built a mobile studio in the back of their tour bus.
A studio on a bus? That sounds like an acoustic nightmare.
It is. I mean, think about it. The vibration from the road, the engine noise. But they retrofitted the whole back lounge with Pro Tools, rigs, preamps, and even little isolation booths for vocals. And on that bus, while touring the world for Hybrid Theory, they produced 80 demos. 80. Which they then whittled down to the 13 tracks that would become their second album, Meteora.
And Meteora, man, that album sounds huge, but it's different. It's a clear evolution.
It is. They knew they couldn't just remake Hybrid Theory. They had to evolve. And you can hear it right from the first track, Somewhere I Belong.
The intro to that song is just iconic, that sweeping reversed sound.
It sounds like a synthesizer, right? Some kind of weird electronic pad. It's actually an acoustic guitar. Chester was just noodling around, playing this little folk-sounding riff on an acoustic guitar. Mike recorded it, took it into the computer, reversed it, chopped it up into little bits, and then rearranged it to create that electronic intro.
So it's organic and digital at the exact same time.
It's a perfect example of their process, taking something totally organic and processing it until it sounds uniquely them.
And Faint, that song is just pure, frantic energy.
Originally, that was a slow track. It was written at 70 beats per minute.
Slow. Faint is one of the fastest, most intense songs they have.
Mike just had the idea to speed it up. He took it to 135 beats per minute, which is basically a trance or a drum and bass tempo. And if you listen closely, Brad's guitars are actually pretty minimal on that track. The main driving force is the string sample and the pulsing electronics. It's a rock song built on a techno chassis.
And then they took this huge risk with
the Japanese flute sample, the shakuhachi.
A shakuhachi flute on a nu metal album in 2000. That should not.
It really shouldn't, but somehow it does. It just showed they were not afraid to look way outside the box for inspiration.
But the song that really stands out on Meteora, especially when you look back with hindsight, is Breaking the Habit.
This is a pivotal track for them.
Yeah.
A real turning. Up until this point, the Linkin Park formula was pretty clear. Mike raps the verses, Chester screams the chorus. Breaking the Habit shatters that formula.
How so? What's different about it?
For one, Mike had been trying to write it for years. Started as an instrumental. But more importantly, there's no rapping, no screaming, no heavy, distorted guitars. It's orchestral, it's electronic. It honestly has more in common with Depeche Mode than it does with Korn.
And Mike wrote the lyrics, but for Chester to sing. And those lyrics, I'm breaking the habit tonight.
Mike wrote it as this desperate plea to break cycles of self-destruction, thinking about friends he knew. But for the rest of the band, it took on this terrifying new meaning because they were watching Chester disappear on these wild nights during tours, and he'd come back the next day completely wrecked. They were watching him live, the lyrics that Mike wrote right there in real time.
So Meteora drops. And the sophomore slump?
What sophomore slump? It sold 810,000 copies in the first week in the U.S. alone. It completely proved they weren't a fluke. It proved they could survive the death of nu metal by just being Linkin Park.
But while the band is soaring to these new heights, we have to talk about what was happening inside Chester. Because this is the part of the deep dive where we have to look at the human cost behind the Platinum Records.
We have to. Chester's story is it's heartbreakingly complex.
It starts in childhood, doesn't it? Long before the band.
It does. His parents divorced when he was 11, and by his own account, he felt completely abandoned. He felt like his whole world just fell apart. But the trauma goes so much deeper than that. He was sexually abused by an older...
And this started when he was 7 or 8.
Started around 7 or 8 years old, and it lasted until he was 30. That kind of trauma At that age, it just destroys a person's foundation of trust and safety before it's even had a chance to be built.
And on top of that, he was severely bullied in high school. He described being knocked around like a rag.
So you have this immense layered trauma from all sides, and he described his own mind in this really haunting way.
The bad neighbor.
Yeah, he called it a bad neighborhood. He said, I have a bad neighborhood in my head, and I shouldn't walk there alone.
That is just such a powerful, scary image, to feel like your own mind is a place you're not safe.
It is. And to cope with that neighborhood, to try and numb the noise, he started using drugs and alcohol very young. It was an escape. It was self-medication.
But here's the thing that I think, or maybe just surprised. Mike Shinoda talked about this duality in Chester's personality. Because if you saw him in interviews, he wasn't this moping, depressed guy.
No, quite the opposite. Mike said Chester incredible goofy. He was funny. He was always doing impressions and telling jokes. He had this profound lightness to him. But underneath all of that, there was this deep, heart-like dark. The humor was a shield. It was a defense mechanism.
It's the classic tears of a clown dynamic. The funniest person in the room is often the one in pain.
In a way, yes. But I think it's also that the art, the music, was literally keeping him alive. Chester said it openly, many times. Music was the only thing that made sense to him. His ability to verbalize depression, he described happiness draining away like dirty water down a drain. That was therapy for him and for millions of other people.
So the band continued. They keep evolving. They release Minutes to Midnight with Rick Rubin, who famously strips away their signature sound, all the reverb and sample.
Then they do 1,000 Sun, which is this wild experimental concept album with almost no guitars. The Hunting Party is a return to aggression. They just refuse to stay in a box.
Which is commendable as an artist. They never made Hybrid Theory Part, even though fans and the label probably begged for it. They challenged their audience every single time.
Always.
But then we get to 2017, and the album One More Light.
The controversial album.
The band went full pop, and the backlash from the fan base, it was brutal.
It really was. Fans and critics were ruthless. They called them sellouts. They said they were chasing trends, trying to sound like Imagine Dragons or the Chainsmokers.
And Chester took that really, really hard.
He did. He was publicly fighting with fans on Twitter. He was lashing out. Because for him, this album was intensely personal. If you actually look past the production and read the lyrics of a song like Heavy, I don't like my mind right now, stacking up problems that are so unnecessary, it's a confession.
It's a cry for help.
It's a direct cry for help, but it's hidden inside this shiny pop song. And that's the tragic irony. The fans were attacking the sound, and they completely missed the mess. They heard the polished production, and they just stopped listening to the words.
And then in May of 2017, something happens that seems to set the final tragic dominoes in motion. Chris Cornell.
Chester and Chris Cornell, the frontman of Soundgarden and Audioslave, they were very, very close friends. They were like brothers. They toured together. They understood each other's struggles.
And Chris Cornell died by suicide in May 2017.
And it completely devastated Chester. He sang hallelujah at Cornell's funeral. If you watch the footage, people who were there said it was a fragile, heartbreaking performance. You could hear the grief cracking in his voice. He was barely holding it together.
And then on July 20th, 2017,
which was Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday, the date was not a coincidence.
Chester Bennington died by suicide.
It was a shock to the world. It felt like it came out of nowhere. But looking back at the source material, there were signs, specifically this thing that psychologists call the danger sign regarding his mood.
Explain that. Because he was on a family vacation in Sedona just days before. He seemed happy.
Exactly. He was smiling in photos, he was playing with his kid, and experts often warn that this sudden relief or elevated mood can actually be a terrifying warning sign. It can mean that the person has made a decision to end their life, and so the internal struggle is finally over in their mind.
So family members see this happiness and they think, oh, he's getting better.
But it's actually the calm before the end, the relief of a decision made. He returned to LA alone, supposedly for work, and he was found dead the next morning.
The aftermath of that, it was a seismic event.
It changed everything. It forced the music industry and the public to have a conversation about mental health, especially among men, that it had been actively avoiding for decades.
And the Hollywood Bowl tribute show.
October 2017, a massive concert to honor with all these incredible guest singers. But there was one moment from that night that just defines his entire legacy for him. It was when the band started to play Numb.
And they didn't have a guest singer for that one.
No, they just played the music.
Yeah.
And they left a single spotlight shining on an empty mic stand at the center of the stage.
And the crowd.
The crowd sang the entire song, every word, 17,000 people. It was this incredible, heartbreaking, beautiful moment of shared grief. And it showed that Chester wasn't just singing. For all those years, he had been singing for them.
That gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
It really highlights the cultural impact, you know? Linkin Park didn't just make hits. They validated the feelings of millions of kids who felt like outsiders. Chester's openness about addiction and his trauma, it sparked these necessary conversations. He basically took that bad neighborhood in his head and put it on top 40 radio so millions of kids realized they weren't the only ones living in a bad neighborhood too.
So, when we wrap this all up, what does it all mean? When we look back at the journey from hybrid theory all the way to One More Light.
I think we have to reconsider that cry for help theory regarding One More Light. Was it a warning, or was just art reflecting his reality at that moment? The complexity is that success, even massive global best-selling album in the world's success, it didn't cure the trauma. It couldn't.
That's the hard truth, isn't it? You can have everything you ever dreamed of, and the bad neighborhood in your head is still there. The money and fame don't make it go away.
Exactly. And in a way, the band's refusal to stay in one genre box, it mirrored their refusal to hide their emotions. They were always evolving, always searching musically and emotionally.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on, a provocative question to leave.
Go for it.
If the band had never evolved, if they had just given in and made Hybrid Theory Part 2 and Part 3 to keep the critics and the old school fans happy, would they have survived as long as they did? Or was that constant searching for a new sound essential to their survival as artists, even if it ultimately alienated some of the people who loved them?
That is the question, isn't it? The tension between art and expectation.
Think about that. And hey, maybe go listen to the album One More Light again with fresh ears. You might be surprised. It might sound different now. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Stay curious.